you recognise that quotation, that's because it comes from one of the most famous novels of all time. But if you're not familiar with George Orwell's 1984, don't worry, because I'm about to tell you all about it, including elements from Orwell's imagination that we can see in society today. Firstly, a bit of background. Orwell was inspired to write politically charged novels such as Animal Farm in 1945 and 1984 in 1949 after witnessing the devastating effects of World War II, as well as the rise to power of dictators such as Hitler in Nazi Germany and Stalin in the Soviet Union. His hatred of totalitarianism grew after witnessing the danger of absolute political authority in an age of advancing technology. It may have been written more than 70 years ago, but Orwell's famous novel is more relevant than ever in the world today. It covers themes ranging from mass government surveillance and political propaganda to censorship of the media and erasure of free speech and even free thought. I would even go so far as to say that 2020 is already looking like the new 1984. Why, I hear you ask? Let me walk you through some of the main themes in the novel and compare them with specific political and social situations around the world. By the end of this video, you'll be aware of all the similarities between life in 1984 and life today in 2020. One of the first themes we're introduced to in the novel is government surveillance. In the novel, the citizens of Oceania are constantly under surveillance and scrutiny by their government. Oceania is one of 3 powerful superstates in the novel, and it's governed by an all-seeing, all-powerful party, the face of which is a figure known as Big Brother. The party employs a group of people called the Thought Police, who sniff out, hunt down, and persecute any individuality, any independent thinking, any behaviour that contradicts the party's ideas. Chapter 1 opens with our protagonist Winston Smith entering his flat in Victory Mansions, where we are introduced to a crucial piece of technology implemented by the government, and that is, of course, the telescreen. We find out very early on in the novel that Winston is against the political regime. He purchases a diary, which is legal, and writes in it down with Big Brother. He lives in constant fear that his rebellious thoughts will somehow be conveyed to the Thought Police, either by a subconscious gesture or an expression on his face, a slip of the tongue, even talking in his sleep, because the telescreens do not turn off at night. Now, if you're watching this video, that means you're using an electronic device such as a computer, a laptop, a mobile phone, maybe a tablet, and maybe you're sitting in the comfort of your own home, or you're at work, or in a cafe, or on public transport. But no matter who you are, where you are, or what device you're using, you are in some way being watched. Probably not to the same extent as Winston with the telescreens, but being watched all the same. This is because in the vast majority of countries, governments are increasing their use of mass surveillance, taking us one step closer to Orwell's imagined world. In June 2013, the Edward Snowden whistleblowing scandal occurred, sparking a global debate about surveillance practices and data privacy. Snowden was an employee and subcontractor of the CIA, spending years working in cybersecurity on projects for the National Security Agency. He leaked to journalists details of the secret global surveillance programs being run by the NSA in the United States, in close cooperation with 3 out of its 4 Five Eyes partners: Australia's ASD, Canada's CSEC, and the UK's GCHQ. Numerous classified programs were unveiled. For instance, NSA's PRISM program, which allows for court-approved direct access to Americans' Google and Yahoo accounts, and Tempora, a British Black Ops surveillance program used to buffer internet communications extracted from fibre optic cables, so these can be processed and searched at a later time. It was even revealed that GCHQ had intercepted foreign politicians' communications during the 2009 G20 summit in London. Polls taken in the US in 2013 and the years immediately after showed an almost equal split between those who viewed Snowden as a traitor, for revealing methods to adversaries that could impact operations, and those who saw him as a hero for revealing to the public their worst fears in the age of the internet, that our online data is never truly private. Disclosures about government surveillance prompted some Americans to change the way they use technology. In a survey in late 2014 and early 2015, 87% of Americans said they had heard at least something about government surveillance programs. Among those who had heard something, 25% said they had changed the patterns of their technology use either a great deal or somewhat since the Snowden revelations. 34% of those who were aware of the government surveillance programs said they had taken at least one step to hide or shield their information from the government, such as by changing their privacy settings on social media. In referring to the PRISM program, then President Barack Obama said, "You can't have 100% security and then also have 100% privacy and zero inconvenience. You know, we're going to have to make some choices as a society." Is this a good enough excuse for storing the data of millions of Americans? Data which should have been private and protected? Doesn't this kind of political power and interference have an Orwellian feel to it? Snowden, who remains in Russia where he has taken asylum, says, "The greatest danger still lies ahead. With the refinement of artificial intelligence capabilities such as facial and pattern recognition. An AI-equipped surveillance camera would not be a mere recording device, but could be made into something closer to an automated police officer." Snowden is concerned the US and other governments, aided by large internet companies, are taking a step towards creating a permanent record of everyone on Earth, recording all about their daily lives. This sounds very much like the start of a 1984-style world, with increasing government control and less privacy. While facial recognition software is already in place in countries such as China, we're hearing about it more and more in the UK, to a mixture of disapproval and approval. Chances are you've already come across it in some form or another. Auto-tagging of pictures on Facebook, unlocking your phone with your face, border control at an airport. However, it is increasingly being used out in the real world. For instance, if you've ever shopped at Westfield in London, they use dozens of cameras built into their advertising billboards. These cameras can not only determine your age and gender, but also your mood, ranging from very unhappy to very happy. They then tailor the adverts that you see in accordance to your age, gender and mood. British police have also used facial recognition technology to scan faces in crowds at events or in busy high streets. They try to identify people of interest or people on police watch lists. However, the technology is not yet very accurate, particularly for people of colour. But even if this software was 100% accurate in identifying criminals or people on police watch lists, does that make it acceptable and something that we want to start implementing on all UK streets? Or are we stepping dangerously close to the telescreens of the party, who can instantly identify citizens of Oceania no matter where they are or what they're doing, even in the public toilets? UK organisation Big Brother Watch have spent almost the last 10 years campaigning and protesting against the government's use of facial recognition technology and their spying of citizens. According to their website, they aim to roll back the surveillance state and protect the rights of everyone in the UK to be free from unfair intrusion. Founded in 2009, Big Brother Watch have felt the need in recent years to campaign more and more because government surveillance programs are becoming increasingly common. Another main theme in the novel is censorship. Orwell uses media censorship and control of information to demonstrate the potential power of political parties to influence not only what we see and hear, but what we believe to be true. Winston works in the Ministry of Truth, where it's his job to alter information and change historical facts in order to fit in with the party's ideas and the party's requirements. But he's troubled by the party's changing of history. For instance, Oceania claims that they've always been allies with East Asia in a war against Eurasia, but Winston seems to remember a time when this is not true. Senate House in London was almost certainly the inspiration for the Ministry of Truth, as Orwell's wife worked there during World War II when the building served as the UK's Ministry of Information. The Ministry of Truth was also in some part inspired by the Soviet Union's changing of historical facts and figures during the war. Now, as of today, the UK no longer has a Ministry of Information or indeed a Ministry of Truth. We have no political party or organisation which, changes history in order to fit their agenda. However, that's not to say that other countries in the world do not have these kinds of practices in order to promote their own political agenda. How could I talk about media censorship and control of information without talking about North Korea?
North Korea's own Ministry of Truth is seen in the Korean Central News Agency, the KCNA, that was established in 1946. Today, all local North Korean media outlets are run by this state news agency, with radios and TVs being physically altered to only receive channels chosen by the state. It has also reported fake achievements of North Korea, such as its space program and its standard of living as compared to the United States. Some themes the KCNA consistently cover include denouncing the actions of the US and Japan, as well as promoting the godlike status of Kim Jong-un and his father Kim Jong-il. Their 2,000 employees are under strict watch to make sure they always report in favour of the country. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
One of Orwell's key messages in 1984 is that language is crucial in human thought because it allows us to formulate and express our opinions, our ideas, whatever pops into our head, basically. We need the words to express it. And Orwell suggests that by controlling and limiting language, political parties can control and limit any disobedient or unwanted thoughts. In the novel, this is referred to as thought crime. And so in 1984, the party create this language called Newspeak, and it has limited vocabulary, restricted grammar, and the end goal is to remove the ability to even think disobedient thoughts because you've got no words to use to express that kind of disagreement or disapproval or hatred of the party. Therefore, people will no longer even be able to threaten the ideology of Big Brother or the party.
Many people have drawn comparisons between the party's control of speech in 1984 and the seemingly increasing rules and regulations on what can and cannot be said today, both online and in the real world. In the UK, under Article 10 of the Human Rights Act 1998, everyone has the right to freedom of expression. But the law states that this freedom may be subject to formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society. Those restrictions may be in the interests of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, for the protection of the reputation or rights of others, for preventing the disclosure of information received in confidence, or for maintaining the authority and impartiality of the judiciary. Hate speech is outlawed by a number of different UK laws. Section 4 of the Public Order Act 1986 makes it illegal to use threatening, abusive or insulting words or behaviour that causes or is likely to cause another person harassment, alarm or distress. This law has been revised over the years to include language deemed to incite racial and religious hatred, as well as hatred on the grounds of sexual orientation, and language that encourages terrorism. Criminalising language is a topic of much controversy. Boris Johnson, who famously said last year that Muslim women who wear veils look like bank robbers or letterboxes, argues that the UK needs a campaign for the right to make jokes and the right within the law to be satirical to the point of causing mild offence, because it is when you endlessly shush people up and stifle debate that extremism flourishes.
While most people seem to agree that we should ban any language that incites violence or criminal behaviour, there's further debate around language which, though may be offensive and unpleasant, does not incite violence or criminality. Are we really living in a society that's becoming a little bit too sensitive, as Piers Morgan and Katie Hopkins love to suggest? By enforcing laws on what can and cannot be said, aren't we just inching closer and closer towards the extreme regulations on language that we see in 1984? As of 2019, the UK ranks 33rd out of 180 countries on the Press Freedom Index. Now, this is a list of all countries compiled by the organisation Reporters Without Borders. And it takes into account things like journalists' freedom, the freedom of news organisations, freedom of users of the internet, and it tends to reflect the efforts made by authorities to respect this freedom as well. It's safe to say that whatever the British people who love to complain about lack of free speech are saying, we have a significantly freer society than many countries in the world. This leads me on to my next topic, which is cults of personality and the control of citizens. Now, the citizens of Oceania, such as Winston, are punished for any bad behaviour, whether that's being jailed, tortured, or even executed. When Winston and Julia are discovered having their affair and rebelling against the party, they are reprimanded immediately. Winston is subjected to months and months of brainwashing and torture inside the Ministry of Love, and at last he's sent to Room 101, which is the dreaded place of your worst nightmare. Throughout the novel, Winston has recurring nightmares about rats, and it's in Room 101 that he is forced to confront his worst fear. He has a cage strapped to his head, and O'Brien, who works for the party, is inches away from releasing a little door that will allow the rats to feast upon his face. Winston snaps and pleads with O'Brien to have the torture done to Julia instead of him. Now, this is the ultimate betrayal, and it's the last part of Winston's spirit that gets broken. But this is the good behaviour that the party wants, and in the novel, good behaviour is rewarded. So Winston is released back into society. He earns a lot more money, he works far fewer hours, and he no longer is concerned by the telescreens because he no longer feels any desire to rebel against the party or to betray Big Brother. There's one country in the world where a system of reward and punishment for good and bad behaviour is coming into effect, although arguably not to the same extremes as in 1984. And it is, of course, in China.
This year, in China, a social credit system is coming into full effect. Behaviour that will lower your social credit rating includes playing loud music or eating in rapid transits, jaywalking or going through red lights, failing to appear at a doctor or dentist appointment, or missing a job interview, restaurant reservation or hotel reservation without making notification to cancel, failing to correctly sort personal waste, or fraudulently using other people's ID cards. On the other hand, behaviour listed as positive factors of credit ratings include donating blood, donating to charity, or volunteering for community services. Citizens with low credit ratings are put on a blacklist. In general, it takes 2 to 5 years to be removed from the blacklist, but early removal is possible if the blacklisted person has done enough good things. Certain personal information of the blacklisted people is deliberately made accessible to society, sometimes displayed online, or even at public venues such as cinemas and on buses. Some cities have even banned children of untrustworthy residents from attending private schools and even universities. On the other hand, people with high credit ratings may receive rewards, such as less waiting time at hospitals and government agencies, discounts at hotels, and greater likelihood of receiving job offers.
Supporters of the credit system claim that it helps to regulate social behaviour, it improves quality of life, and it promotes traditional moral values, while critics believe that it infringes the legal rights of residents, especially the right to privacy and personal dignity, and that the system may be a tool for suppression of dissent from the Communist Party of China. There's no question that China is incorporating more and more dictatorial and authoritarian methods of creating perfect citizens who are completely obedient, shockingly similar to the totalitarian command of the party in 1984. One way that a country or political party can establish complete control is through a face or figure who must be obeyed at all times. This often creates what is called a cult of personality. Now in 1984, it's clearly Big Brother. In the world of 1984, the face of Big Brother is inescapable. Not only does he frighten citizens into complying with party rules without question, but he commands and receives their adoration as well. It's not made clear whether Big Brother is actually real, but as a means of party control, he's incredibly effective. Cults of personality can be seen in several countries across the world today. Some people would argue that Trump or Putin have their own cults of personality, but if we travel further afield, we can find much more extreme examples. One that has already been mentioned is, of course, Kim Jong-un in North Korea.
Shortly after he came to power, a 560-metre-long propaganda sign was erected in his honour. Supposedly visible from space, it reads, "Long live General Kim Jong-un, the shining sun." But Kim Jong-un is not quite as revered as his father and grandfather. A woman who ran into a burning building to save her children somehow forgot to save the portraits of Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung, which were hanging on her wall, and she now faces a prison sentence for this crime. In 2017 and 2018, North Korea held last place in the Press Freedom Index, and it's not hard to see why.
However, in a shocking turn of events, in the Press Freedom Index of 2019, another country slipped and took North Korea's place as bottom of the list. That position has fallen to Turkmenistan.
The Turkmen government controls all media, and the few internet users are able to access only a highly censored version of the internet. But that does not satisfy President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, who is also known as Father Protector. In recent years, several journalists have been arrested, tortured, physically attacked, or otherwise forced to stop working, with the result that their employers now generally use the services of citizen journalists. On a pretext of making the cities more visually appealing, authorities periodically remove satellite dishes, depriving the public of one of the few remaining ways to access uncontrolled news coverage. A new broadcasting law provides in theory for the possibility of privately owned TV channels, but only on condition that they promote a positive image of Turkmenistan. Despite his totalitarian control, Berdimuhamedov is seemingly loved and worshipped by his people. Is it due to his frequently odd yet fascinating behaviour? After reports came about that he had died in July 2019, Berdimuhamedov released a video of him driving in donuts around a giant pit of fire. He even DJ'd his own music at a New Year's Eve party. Though it seems a mixture of hilarious and insane to most people, it seems as though Berdimuhamedov's cult of personality has been a vital source of government control and citizen compliance.
Now, I don't think that here in the UK we're going to be having pictures of Boris Johnson's great big smiling face plastered on buildings and billboards anytime soon. Nor will Parliament come up with their own version of the thought police, ready to sniff out and eradicate any individuality or rebellious thinking. However, these extreme ideas are in fact a reality for many countries around the world. In certain nations, media censorship and mass surveillance is so extreme that people can't even consider being free from it. Organisations such as Amnesty International and Reporters Without Borders have taken it upon themselves to fight for the freedom of these other nations. Smaller scale Orwellian-style aspects such as control of online data and putting laws around free speech are being put in place in less restricted countries such as the USA and the UK, but these concepts are clearly expanding in 2020. The future of UK mass surveillance is not certain, but I think it's safe to say that we can anticipate less and less privacy and a closer watch from our beady-eyed government. Orwell did not believe that 35 years after the publication of 1984 in 1949, that the world would be ruled by a big brother. But he often proclaimed that 1984 could happen if man did not become aware of the assaults on his personal freedom and did not defend his most precious right, the right to have his own thoughts.